Why is a Russian oligarch just admitted to interfering in the US elections? And are the Russians finally taking notes and actually trying to have their attacks make sense? And is this all part of a larger scheme by one Russian oligarch? Let's get into it. I'm Paul, US Army combat veteran. This is your daily Ukraine update. It is November 8th, 2022. Okay, so when we look at the tactical map, there aren't really any significant changes to the front lines. But what is notable is, as we've seen, right, Russia alternating between artillery barrages and ground assaults have appeared to actually have tightened up their discipline in terms of where and when they are assaulting. At the top, we see Bilohorivka, right? This is a salient that actually makes sense to attempt to seize. This town, of course, is vulnerable on three sides, or at least two sides, to Ukraine or Russian attacks, meaning that it's a vulnerable piece of territory. That said, this looks like kind of a weaker assault. But when we scroll down, we see near Bakhmut something that actually resembles a real offensive. You can see here, this is actual tactics at use. There's an attack that's cutting off a major reinforcement route here into the city. There is a main assault down this avenue of advance into Bakhmut, and to everyone's shock, mine nonetheless, there is an actual flanking maneuver, another attack taking place along another axis of advance. This is a shocking tactical development. Though, for the record, guys, a flanking maneuver is something taught to like the average squad leader, you know, but still, nonetheless, the fact that the Russians appear to be synchronizing their attacks and engaging in some sort of coordination, some level of coordination of their offensives is a truly shocking development, a testament to the fact that maybe somebody actually is sort of organizing the Wagner group that are operating here in Bakhmut. I know they are a unit comprised almost entirely of prisoners with little or no military training, but we are still experience is also a teacher. And so at some point, if they can stay alive long enough, they'll become battle-hardened soldiers. And if their commanders can stay sober long enough, they may actually start to use real military tactics like this one, which is bad news for the Ukrainians. But again, it's hard for me to be positive about Russia's chances of taking Bakhmut simply because they have had months and months and months and months and months to do it. They've been trying to do it, and they have failed repeatedly. And Bakhmut is, honestly, the inability to take Bakhmut is probably one of the biggest thorns in Prigozhin's side. And we're going to break down the Russian oligarch Yevgeny Prigozhin here in a second once we finish taking a look at these attacks, because if you have to understand his mentality to understand why we're so hung up over this town of Bakhmut. All right, we look to the south, we see things that look a little more like the Russia we know and love. You can see here trying to seize what looks like a rail yard here. This looks like a rail station. And I guess controlling that would, well, it wouldn't give Russia control of anything. I guess maybe it would impede the ability of the Ukrainian forces to run supplies up and down here. But you guys can see this rail line has been targeted by indirect fire a lot, and seizing and breaking it up seems like a priority for Russia. I sort of doubt that Ukraine is really using this, simply because look at how close you'd have to get to the front lines to load and offload equipment. You would literally be in Russian gun sites. And it's not like Bakhmut doesn't have dozens and dozens of other much more feasible railroads into the city, right? Like here's one, there's a whole network up here, and of course you have roadways which seem much more accessible, much more repairable, leading into the Bakhmut area, which run entirely through Ukrainian controlled spaces. Again, even further to the south, you see something that this looks more like the Russia we know and love, right? 3 attacks three completely disconnected directions, no real coordination happening. There's like some sort of significance, but again, it's like, why would you launch two ineffective attacks when you could launch one effective attack at the same target? Especially, I'm looking at this town here, Marinka, because Russia controls a portion of it already. They're trying to just expel the remaining Ukrainians. And people are like, why are you giving Russia advice? It's because Russia's just dumb. I don't know how else to put it, guys. This is just dumb. Like, all the Ukrainians have to do is sit there and just shoot them, because they're unable to, again, with the exception apparently of Bakhmut, they're unable to perform military, what we would consider real military operations, like real command and control. The most command and control we see is alternating between fires and ground assault, and it's not really that helpful. And Ukrainians are doing the right thing, frankly, by forcing Russia to just pay a huge price to seize every single block, especially when they launch these incredibly anemic, underpowered attacks that maybe they even seize territory, but they pay a tremendous, tremendous price for it. And so again, for Ukrainian forces who have considerable resupplies stretching all the way back to Kiev, it's hard to say that they need to go on offense when Russia is throwing so many of its troops into this meat grinder to so little effect. It's like the old saying, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And frankly, Russia makes a lot of mistakes. But let's talk a little bit about the big situation, right? And that is, of course, some shifting dynamics inside the Kremlin, inside Russia. So first, we have to talk about the Millbloggers. ISW covers the Russian military information space, right? Just like how you've got guys like me, like Artur Reddy, Ryan Macbeth, and other English speakers covering the Ukraine war, providing you guys with information. Russia has similar people providing information to the Russian-speaking world. And these guys exert a lot of influence on Russian politics, especially the ones who are very, very pro-military and pro-war, Russian nationalist bloggers. And these guys have a really rabid audience and a really committed audience in the Russian language space. So, and the Russian ultranationalists are Putin's strongest base of power. So catering to these Millbloggers is really, really important and becoming apparently more important. See, Russian Millbloggers are furious about the extensive losses and poor command within the 155th Naval Brigade of the Pacific Fleet. This one particular brigade, Russian Millbloggers accuse Russian leadership of throwing the brigade into an incomprehensible offensive near Pavlivka in Donetsk, where it suffered losses amounting to 300 killed, wounded, and missing, and lost half its equipment in 4 days. Pavlivka, let's see if we can find, actually we'll find it on the, let's do it. This is hard to search for. The Deep State map has a great searchability function. We'll see where Pavlivka was, and we'll try to decide. There you go, in Luhansk. I thought this was, nope, wrong Pavlivka. Let's see. Do we have this? Is this even a real place? Did they just make this up? It's in Donetsk. So we're looking for the Pavlivka, not in Luhansk Oblast. Should be one in Donetsk. Dniepro, Kherson. There we go, Donetsk. Wow. This was tactically meaningless. Why on earth would you throw a whole brigade into Pavlivka? That doesn't make any sense. Here it is. Here it is right here. Yeah, we just talked about it yesterday. Yep, completely tactically insignificant, tactically meaningless, totally unsupported. And you can see here, they continue to launch attacks into this Pavlivka, trying to take this city, when we can see full well that It's totally under Ukrainian control. They have to pass through a large open area to get to it. They only control one axis of advance leading to the city. And they can't really be encircled because of this river. And Ukrainians control a bridge going into the city. This is not shocking that the Russian forces are unable to take this. And look in the grand scheme of things. What do you need this territory for? Is this really part of your operational strategy? No, it's not. Your main effort is preparing Kherson for withdrawal, and based on where you're attacking currently, Bakhmut, apparently. Right? I guess you could also argue that seizing these towns is significant, but it's not clear what town they're trying to seize. The point is that, yeah, the Russian millbloggers are right. This is a waste of time and has no strategic value, or at least very limited strategic or operational value. And they are perhaps rightly furious that this is endemic of how the Russian MOD is running this war. Useless offensives, tactically absent, right? No tactics to speak of. And the crazy thing, though, is that the Russian MOD actually issued a response directed at the millbloggers. They're trying to say that less than 1% of the brigade was killed and less than 7% wounded in the past 10 days, and that it was Ukrainians that suffered tremendous losses. Doubt. Right? They said the brigade's losses are greatly exaggerated and speculated that the letter was part of Ukrainian special services. But this is crazy that the Russian millbloggers are this is like the U.S. Department of Defense getting into a Twitter beef with like someone like an egg profile, like Matt7395 or something. This is preposterous, right? But it's a testament to the fact that Russian ultranationalists, the core of Putin's support base, are abandoning him for his inability to run the war. And this is really important because there's in any autocratic regime, the head has to engage in a careful balancing act to remain atop the pyramid because everybody wants your spot. And when there's no election, there's no peaceful way for you to leave. You either go out, you go out in a casket, period. If you're lucky, you go out in a casket of a natural cause, or you go out in a casket of an unnatural cause. That's how autocracies work. That's why they're so dangerous and why democracies and elections are so stinking valuable, because they allow power to transition without having to kill a bunch of people on the interval. So Putin knows this, and everyone under Putin also knows this. So who is trying to raise his profile among Russian ultranationalists? Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin. He recently admitted publicly that he is the owner and operator of the Wagner Group. And Wagner Group is expanding, opening training and management centers for people's militias in Kursk and Belgorod, which operate outside the Russian armed forces. This is scary. You're talking about a warlord level action here where Prigozhin is standing up his own independent military. And it's even scarier because he obviously knows that Russian ultranationalists have a low opinion of the Russian Ministry of Defense, and he has put out a lot of propaganda to show that his Wagner Group is more effective than the Russian Ministry of Defense. And again, he may be correct, but I wouldn't describe his Wagner Group as effective given the fact that they have one goal of their like 5,000 person army, and that's Bakhmut, and they have failed to take any part of it. So it's a tough thing to contend with. But what's also interesting, right? He's even built his own independent line of contact called the Wagner line, and is just constantly dunking on the Russian Ministry of Defense, which explains, right? He's trying to position himself as a as someone as strong or stronger and more effective than Putin, right? And certainly more effective than the Russian Ministry of Defense. So it's possible that Prigozhin, I would suspect that Prigozhin probably is expecting Putin to die within the next year and is positioning himself as a natural successor. Why do I say this? Because he's very open about it, right? And you have to think, if you're Putin and you think you're going to spend the next decade in power, this level of open rebellion, so to speak, this level of open criticism, revealing, right? Putin clearly said it was important that he not publicly acknowledge the U.S. election interference. But as you guys can see, Prigozhin is happy to acknowledge that he has interfered, is interfering, and will continue to interfere in U.S. elections. That is a huge admission and a huge pivot from Putin's policy, right? Putin, if he thought he was going to be in power for another decade, would absolutely not tolerate this. The fact is, I think Prigozhin suspects that Putin, again, naturally or unnaturally, will end up replaced as Russian leader. And he wants to be positioned in the strongest possible, position to be Putin's successor. And to do that, he has to cater to Vladimir Putin's power base, right? What is his power base? Russian ultra-nationalists. So he is going and he's showing that he is militarily more effective, that he has delivered really concrete blows to Russia's enemy, the United States, and he is showing that he is able to build the partnerships and networks necessary to be an effective power broker in the Kremlin. So anyway, guys, if you want to check out more about this story, you want to go to ground.news. I have the link in the description. You guys can see Ground News is actually a good source for these sort of breaking stories because they show the bias distribution of everyone who's reporting them. It also, of course, lets you see each individual news outlet, where they lean politically, what their commitment to factuality is, and who owns them. This has been really useful in this conflict because, of course, it helps me tease out what is state-backed propaganda, what is actual actual news, and to know which stories I might not see as someone who, for example, doesn't really consume ultra-partisan news sources, right? That doesn't mean, though, that other people aren't, and it's really useful to be able to see those things. Anyway, guys, the link, as always, is in the description, and of course, if you want access to the combat videos that I can't show you on YouTube anymore. These are the most intense combat footage breakdowns coming out of Ukraine. Those are all on the Patreon. Thanks so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys are the ones who make this channel possible. I'll see you all in the next one.